Number 9. The Great Wall of China's popularity. Fun fact, the Great Wall of China originally wasn't one long wall. It actually was sections of a wall that were eventually filled in to become one great long wall that we now know of today. Furthermore, the wall that we know of now isn't the same wall per se that was started with, as this wall has been upgraded, remade, rebuilt, and enhanced over the various Chinese dynasties. There was even completely separate Great Walls that don't exist anymore, but this one does. Widely hailed as one of the most impressive feats by man, the Chinese initially built the Great Wall of China to help ward off raiders and invaders to the north. As their nation and empire grew, so did the wall, to the extent that as of now, the wall is over 13,000 miles long. It is so big that it is one of the few landmarks you can see from outer space. Naturally, people go to the wall not just for the view, but to walk upon it and see just how far it truly goes. It's attracted all manner of people from various nations and even a president from the United States in a historic moment. Millions of people come to see the wall, which isn't too hard when the length of the thing allows you to see it from various places and angles. 8. The building of the wall. So as we teased, the Great Wall of China wasn't just something that was made in one sitting, or even by one group of Chinese people. It's a massive project that took over 1,800 years to make in full, with many people coming together one after another to add on to it and more. Also, as noted, this wasn't the first wall that the Chinese built themselves. In fact, throughout the course of Chinese history, you'll find that walls and barriers were the go-to defense mechanism for them to try and defend against the invaders that they knew were coming. This eventually led to the start of the Qin dynasty, ruled over by Qin Shi Huang. He had captured a whole bunch of places within China, and to ensure that he could defend them, he built a 5,000-kilometer wall. This was meant to defend his territory as well as to keep a lock on what was his. This was the first true part of the Great Wall of China. But as I stated, this wasn't the end of it. As more and more dynasties came to be, they kept the wall up and then added onto it, sometimes to continue the reach of the wall and other times to just improve upon it. The Ming dynasty is one of the dynasties that are most credited with the completion of the wall. This is because of how the wall looks now and how it is kept together. Which brings us to the other misconception of the wall. If you look at it from above, the Great Wall of China looks like one long snaking wall, but that's not exactly true. It's interrupted by various things, including buildings. It is connected, but it's not like regular border walls where there are a continuous line. Rather, it's a network that spans 20,000 kilometers and is broken up by buildings, towers, and more that help connect them. It's still an impressive feat, no doubt, but it's not exactly what everyone says that it is. And if you actually look at the shape of the wall, you'll see all the different angles that the wall turns in. A singular wall would be much straighter. Number 7. The wall's construction force. Given the nature of the Great Wall of China, you would be forgiven for thinking that various townsfolk and soldiers and such were responsible for the bulk of the work. And to an extent, that probably is true. But not unlike many other massive monuments in the world today, back then, the main force of labor were slaves and criminals. Not unlike the Colosseum of Vespasian, where over 10,000 slaves helped build that monument. But for the Great Wall of China, it was the criminal element that really helped make the wall what it was, including in the days of the Qin dynasty, where the wall got started. It was dictated that the wall construction, maintenance, and surveillance were all punishments to be carried out by criminals. The ironic thing here is that when it came to the various crimes that would have been dealt with via wall duty, it was a very wide net. It didn't matter if you were a murderer or someone who just didn't pay their taxes on time, you were sent to the wall. Now, to be clear, there were regular builders, workers, and civilians on the walls, so to make sure that everyone knew which was which, all criminals would have their heads shaved, their faces blackened, and would have their limbs put in chains. You might be thinking, why were they so bent on putting criminals on the wall? Did they not have jails or something? That is one way of thinking about it, but what you need to know here is that building the Great Wall of China was dangerous work. So the Qin dynasty decided that if they were going to have people die on the wall, they'd rather it be criminals. Sure enough, it's believed that over 400,000 people died while working on the wall. 6. Do you want rice with that? Without a doubt, one of the reasons that we marvel at various monuments like the Great Wall of China, the Colosseum, and Great Pyramids of Giza and more is that they're still around for us to admire today, despite being thousands upon thousands of years old at times. For the Great Wall especially, This was a project that took place in parts over 1,800 years, unlike others that took place in one area at virtually one time period. So how is it that the Great Wall of China still stands? Part of it is because of how it was built, but apparently there was also a secret ingredient that helped keep the wall up: rice. No, I'm not joking with you. When it came to the mortar that they used to help keep the bricks and stones that comprised the wall together, they would put in a special kind of rice called sticky rice in the mix to help seal everything up. But whether they knew it or not, they also made it so that the weather and other elements wouldn't be able to chip away at it, as the thing that made the rice sticky also made it so that the stones and mortar were more resistant. And you thought rice was just tasty. Number 5, the rooster crow. Okay, so you remember a little bit ago when I mentioned how there had been about 400,000 deaths on the Great Wall of China during construction? Well, when you basically kill that many people via labor, accidents obviously not intentional deaths, that means that there are going to be a lot of people in mourning over the course of its construction. What's more, the Chinese at this time were very superstitious about what would happen to the souls and the spirits of their family members because they died at the wall, to the extent that they honestly feared that they would be trapped within the wall for all eternity. Not a nice way to stick around, am I right? So, the government decided to help ease the pain and fears of the locals by doing a certain tradition. When a death happened at the wall, a man would walk across the wall with a rooster in his hands. The rooster would crow, and that was believed to be a sign or a message to the souls and spirits of the departed that they could leave the wall and go to the afterlife in peace. You might think that this is a somewhat odd way to please the dead and their restless spirits, but remember that animals in many cultures have power, and the rooster is one of the members of the Chinese zodiac, so it all lines up in the end. 4. It was predicted? Sometimes in history, whether we want to believe it or not, there are things that happen that seem to predict what will come in the future, such as texts from historical documents, the last writings of Nostradamus, and in terms of the Great Wall of China, a poem called the Shijing, a collection of ancient Chinese poems written between the 11th and 7th centuries BCE, well before the Great Wall of China was made. Within the poem itself lies an entry stating that a king would build a defensive barrier in order to ward off invaders. Now, to be fair, the use of small walls and barriers have been used for many ages, including in Chinese history. But the way that they talked about the barrier in the Shijing seems to point to this being about the Great Wall of China in some form. Sure, it's a coincidence, but it's one heck of a coincidence if you ask me. Number 3, a tribute. We already noted that one true purpose of the Great Wall of China was to keep invading forces out, right? But there was also a more subtle purpose to the wall that was added on later. Mainly, some of the buildings that helped connect the far reaches of the wall were built as temples and monuments to certain legendary figures in Chinese history. One of them was Guan Yu, a 3rd century general who served during the Han Dynasty. He is honored with temples built on the wall. There are also tributes to the 4 heavenly kings in the Buddhism faith, one of the prominent religions in China. This perfectly ties into the fact that China is a place of deep belief and tribute. And given the length of the wall, there are many other tributes and temples and places of remembrance for people to go and see as they walk along it. 2. China honestly didn't care about the wall until the 19th century. I want you to picture in your minds the various massive monuments of the world, regardless of culture and location. How much do you think these nations value those monuments? Depending on the place, it would be fair to say that they care very deeply for them, especially if they're a window into their history. But for China, they honestly didn't care about the Great Wall until about the 19th century in regards to its historical importance. Which I know sounds odd because of the many dynasties that helped make it, but in truth, they just didn't care because it wasn't doing anything for them right then and there. And by the 19th century, the Great Wall was just a wall, one that could be destroyed via explosives or bulldozed by tanks when the time came. It wasn't an effective means of anything except to get tourists. Because as the 19th century went on, they found that more and more tourists were spreading the word about the Great Wall, and they were making art of it and telling stories of it and on and on. When China realized there was a money-making opportunity here, they started to expand upon it. They would do tours, have art and trinkets to buy and sell for the wall, and on and on. So if you think about it, if it wasn't for the other nations, the Great Wall might have just been left to rot. Not something you'd expect for one of the modern wonders of the world. Am I right? Number 1, it really didn't keep invaders out. So when you think of the Great Wall of China, you think about its length and you think about its purpose, especially when you think about the many movies and such that have talked about how the wall was supposed to protect China from all attackers. But that really didn't happen. The wall exists and battles have been fought at it and on it, but it honestly didn't deter that many people. Granted, there were certain nomadic tribes that the Chinese could easily defeat with their higher ground and their weapons, but when it came to forces like the Mongols, ones who could think very tactically and seize opportunities, it honestly didn't affect them too much. Sure, the height of the wall would ensure first responses and be able to allow first contact, but the wall actually isn't that high. On average, the height of the wall is about 20 feet, so if you were to bring ladders or even do human ladders, you can breach the wall pretty easily. To that extent, when Genghis Khan came around, he not only conquered the wall, he put his own people on it to help make sure that the supply lines of his army would be unharmed. Many dynasties, including the Ming dynasty, relied heavily on the wall and fell when it was breached by their enemies. Nowadays, the Great Wall of China seems more like a symbol of endurance than an actual military fortification that helped define the country, which in some ways makes the Great Wall of China one of the most ironic monuments in the world. I'm just saying. 8. Where are the marketplaces? Machu Picchu is arguably one of the most interesting and revealing places in the world. Why? Because it's through this city that we got to take a look inside the Incan Empire. This was a tribe that ruled a lot of South America for some time, including Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, and more. And yet, for a while, we didn't know that much about them until we found Machu Picchu. This was one of the biggest cities in the empire, and as such, we were able to discern a lot from it. And yet, one of the biggest shocks of the discovery of the city is one that flies in the face of virtually every other civilization in the world. How so? Well, in this city, and apparently in all other cities in the empire, they didn't have marketplaces, which makes you wonder how they bought food, traded items, or even just interacted with one another. Numerous civilizations built their cities around a marketplace, yet the Incas didn't. Why? And before you say something like, maybe that's why they aren't around anymore, that's not true. They were driven out by Spanish invaders. Before then, they ruled for hundreds of years without issue. So what is the explanation for this major mystery? We honestly don't know. It's very possible that the Incas were ones who did their buying and trading in different ways that wouldn't require a marketplace per se. What they were may just be lost to time, but it is a very curious thing because, again, every other society had them, and we base all of our societies today around a place to get food and water and items. So why didn't they? What made their societies work without them? We may never know. Number 7. The vastness of the Incas. While Machu Picchu may be a focal point for the nation, the Incas themselves are just as much a mystery in certain ways as other early civilizations, especially when you consider that they not only made Machu Picchu, but a vast empire that many are still discovering, or should I say, rediscovering to this day. And everything we find about them is that they were much more organized and intelligent than some are willing to admit. If you're curious about where and when they came from, that would be the Cusco region of Peru in the 13th century. But they didn't just stay in Peru. They went across much of what is now South America and made a vast empire for themselves. One that is said to be about a 300,000 square mile area to house everyone in. And this included going into other tribes and assimilating them into the culture at large. By the time they were done growing, they had anywhere between 3 and 12 million people within their empire. There's honestly no way of knowing which is the real number, or even if it was somewhere in the middle. They lorded over their realm, which they dubbed the Four Corners Together, and within that realm were 20,000 miles of roads, provincial governors, granaries and storehouses, high-altitude agriculture, and an economic system called Mita, where citizens provided labor, goods, or military service to the state in exchange for food and protection. So what happened to the Inca? Well, that technically isn't too much of a mystery. The answer there is the Spaniards. During that time, Francisco Pizarro and the Spanish conquistadors came and fought against the native tribes in order to get treasures and more for Spain, as well as claim lands for their own. The Inca were defeated, but unlike certain other cultures, they fought to the bitter end, all the way up until 1572, when their last great city was captured. Still though, their remains and their homes are scattered across the forests of South America, and they're still being discovered to this day, not unlike Machu Picchu. 6. When was Machu Picchu rediscovered? Sometimes you find the best archaeological finds in the weirdest of places and times, and sometimes these finds aren't ones you simply dig up, but rather just stumble upon. After all, if you don't know where to look for something, it might just go unnoticed for hundreds of years. Don't believe me? Well, I present to you Machu Picchu. This complex was made by the Incas, as we noted, and can be found on a mountainside in Peru, which explains why many people never found it, including some conquering armies like the conquistadors, which is actually rather impressive given that this site is 126 square miles in area. That's very big, and yet it wasn't rediscovered until 1911. As for who went and found it again, that would be due to an American named Hiram Bingham, who, according to sources, went to the country, then traveled by mule and foot to reach this place. But get this, the locals only called it a retreat that native leaders went to, likely meaning that they didn't know what they had stumbled upon. Can you imagine that? Going to a place and calling it a retreat, not knowing that you were literally in the annals of history? Yeah, that'd be a shock. Anyway, once Bingham found the place, he was looking for ruins initially, he actually went back to America to get more funding and struck a deal with the president of Peru to help excavate the site with local labor to reveal the city as we know it now. There is one funny catch though. You see, Bingham worked out the deal with Peru to dig there and be there legally, but some people thought he was ruining the land after a while, including stealing artifacts and such, which he was and he wasn't. He was taking items to be sure, but he was doing it under the laws of Peru. These laws state that any artifacts that are found are owned by the discoverer, which Bingham was in most cases. That didn't stop the press and people from rising up and basically kicking him out about 4 months after he started. More excavations were done in 1914 and 1915, and he got to be a part of those as well despite local backlash. Oh well. Fun fact, the finding of Machu Picchu made Bingham so famous that a highway up to Machu Picchu was named after him, and he eventually became a governor and a senator for the state of Connecticut. Not a bad life, huh? Number 5. We honestly don't know why Machu Picchu was built. Most times when you hear about a massive archaeological site, you think about how it was constructed and the purpose of it. Yet, despite the size and artifacts of Machu Picchu, we still don't know why it was built there or its purpose to the Incan Empire as a whole. We do know some things obviously, such as how it was mid-15th century, give or take, and that it was likely built after the Incan Empire was truly formed via the defeat of Chankay tribe. And it might have even been built by one of the major leaders of the empire in Pachacuti. But that last bit is still speculative, just like the whole site is speculative as to its purpose. There have been guesses as to what it is and what it isn't, of course. A popular one is that this was a personal retreat for Pachacuti and his family and possibly closest followers. There was even a lawsuit brought up by the descendants of Pachacuti to try and get their lands back, including a retreat that was known as Pichu. Another possibility was that it was a temple of sorts, a place where those in the Incan faith would come to on a pilgrimage in order to connect with the gods. There are some who even say that this place was a racing ground for certain young ladies who would be sacrificed to the gods when they came of age. Yet, bones found in Machu Picchu show that both men and women lived on the site and could have been workers. Workers for what? We honestly don't know, and new clues haven't provided enough to give hints as to what the site honestly is. 4. How did the conquistadors not find the place? So, as we alluded to earlier, despite the Spanish Inquisition, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition, basically taking out the entire Incan Empire over the course of a few decades, which took that long because the Incas did guerrilla tactics and used the territory to their advantage. They never did find Machu Picchu. But why is that? After all, it was one of their more important sites, or at least that is what we infer via the artifacts and other things we've found at the site. But if it was so important, shouldn't the Spaniards have found it? Not exactly. You see, not unlike today, if you don't know the terrain and you don't have the means, you're not going to find certain places. Not unlike if you just go down a singular highway across a country, you're not going to see all the little towns and villages that populate the nations. For the Incas, once the Spaniards came to try and destroy their way of life, they actually abandoned Machu Picchu, which is ironic because that meant that by the time they left it, it had only been around for about 100 years. Since no one was living there and the various attacks never got close to where it was, the Spaniards never had a reason to look for it, which is another reason it was so preserved by the time that Bingham had gotten there in 1911. Number 3. The War for Artifacts. So, remember Hiram Bingham? The guy who helped rediscover Machu Picchu? Was accused of stealing thousands of artifacts? Yeah, that guy. Well, you ever wonder where those artifacts ended up? That would be none other than Yale University. They were studied there and then put on display for everyone to see, which was great for the university and to those who wanted to see the artifacts up close and ask questions about them. But for the people of Peru, yeah, not so much. Even when Bingham came back to finish the excavations in 1914 and 1915, there were wars going on behind the scenes about the artifacts he was finding. This died down for a few decades, and then in 2003, Yale announced that they were going to do a touring exhibit of the Machu Picchu artifacts. When this was revealed, the people of Peru, including the president of the nation at the time, decided that they were going to fight back. They went around to anyone who would listen and begged them to bring the artifacts back home, even going to the President of the United States and the Pope to have justice be done in their eyes. Eventually, an accord was reached, and by 2012, all the artifacts were returned, and the UNISAC Yale International Center for the Study of Machu Picchu and Inca Culture in Cusco was born, a fitting compromise and ending to a confrontation many decades in the making. 2. The city was built to last. Despite not knowing the full purpose of the city of Machu Picchu, we can say a few things about it based on what's visible both in front of our eyes and what the city was built on. And no, I don't mean the ground, but rather the materials that were used to craft the city itself. You see, South America is known to have some rather disastrous natural disasters, one of which is earthquakes. In fact, earthquakes devastated certain other Incan cities in the past. But when the engineers and stonemasons built up Machu Picchu, they made it so that no earthquake could shake it down. Deep foundations and a sophisticated drainage system prevented landslides, while precise stone carving allowed blocks to be placed tightly to one another without requiring mortar. The white granite blocks, cut by direct hammering with primitive hand tools, are said to dance during tremors and fall safely back into place, leaving the citadel largely undamaged over a 500-year period. This is an astounding piece of work, and it's further impressive considering some of the various tools and materials that they wouldn't have had in the 1400s, showing that much like many other wonders of the world, if you have the time, the people, and the planning, you can make things that are built to last. Number 1. The power of tourism. Despite being lost for hundreds of years, Machu Picchu has now become a key location not just in Peru, but in the world at large. In 2007, it was dubbed one of the new wonders of the world because of its impressive construction and its ability to stay intact for so long. And like any structure that is impressive, people want to see it. In fact, people from South America and all over the world come to see Machu Picchu, which is a bit of a problem technically. You see, the site is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which means that it's protected by the government and certain organizations to ensure that no damage comes to it. So by law, only 2,500 people per day are allowed to visit it. But that rule isn't exactly applied because most times it's like 5,000 people a day come to see it. So now the site is a bit overcrowded with tourists. To combat this, the government aims to pour $30 million into the site to try and make it more advanced so people can see it from places like a visitor's center without having to be on the site itself. Its meaning is up for debate. Let's think about statues and monuments in the grander sense for a bit, okay? Every single time one of them is made, they're made for a purpose, correct? For example, the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. is meant to be a symbol of President Abraham Lincoln and the freedom he brought to so many people during his run as president. That's a very clear meaning, and rightfully so, I might add. But for the Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio de Janeiro, the meaning is technically a bit up for debate, because how a lot of people see it is very different from how other people see it. Not sure? You might just look at it and go, it's meant to be a representation of Jesus Christ of the Christian faith. And that's true to an extent, but what is built is not always the meaning. For some people, they look at the statue and see Christ's position and feel that it's a depiction of sorts of him on the cross on which he died. signaling that this is a statue that honors the death of Christ, which gave all people life after death via resurrection into heaven, making it a very holy meaning to the statue. But to others, they look at Christ's arms not as a position on the legendary cross, but as a symbol of open arms. Jesus said to love God and love people, to love thy neighbor as thyself, and to give to those in need. So to many people in Rio de Janeiro, they see it as a sign that they need to be good to those next to them and those who come into their country. That statue is really important for us in Rio and for the people in Brazil. It has a lot of things behind it, not just the religious symbol, but the welcoming symbol of open arms. It's also supposed to mean we are good hosts, one local Brazilian said. To be clear, there is no right or wrong answer to the meaning of the statue. Rather, this is just how ambiguous the statue is in terms of its construction and position, which is fine. Art is meant to be open to interpretation, and statues are definitely art. Number 9. It was built to fight godlessness. Okay, so we've delved a lot into what the statue might actually mean in terms of its position and such. But let's ask a more basic question. Why was it built at all? You might think this is an odd question given that the statue is Christ the Redeemer and likely was built to show off the Brazilian faith, right? Well, that might have been a reason for other countries, but for Brazil in 1920, it was a little more complicated than that. You see, this all really started back in 1889 when the Brazilian Republic was officially born. As part of this new republic, they separated church from state, something many other countries have done over the years. But to those who practiced the Catholic faith, which was the dominant religion in Brazil, they feared that this separation would cause them to deter from the path of faith and the path of God. Their fears grew over the years, especially when World War I happened. At that point in time, they saw an increase in godlessness, and thus decided that they needed a statue to remind them of their God and who was watching over them, and on and on. Thus, in 1920, they hired Heitor da Silva Costa to design and make the statue that would tower over the city and be a daily reminder of Christ. You could argue that this was a bit petty of the Catholic Church to build a statue as a daily reminder, but you need to remember that they weren't doing it for vain reasons. They were just trying to make sure that everyone remembered that there is a better path, one that doesn't involve dark ways, and the statue was made as a reminder of that. And it worked, to be clear. And now Christ the Redeemer is one of the most beloved statues in all the world, though it almost didn't start out that way. 8. Christ with a ball. Whether we realize it or not, statue makers go through a long process of trying to make sure that their upcoming statues look the right way, are made the right way, and convey the right message. Heitor da Silva Costa was no different, and not unlike many other legendary statues, the Christ the Redeemer statue once had a very different design plan. What was it going to look like? Well, most of it was the same. It was a standing Christ. He was looking out over the city and even facing the sun. The biggest changes, though, were in the arms, specifically what he had in his arms. Right now, his arms are empty, but in the original design, he had something in each hand. One hand would have him with a cross, and the other would have a globe in it. The cross obviously representing how Christ had to carry the cross to his execution by hanging on it. And the globe is much like the children's song in how he has the whole world in his hands, thus giving a very clear meaning to the statue. Initially, the men in charge of the project were very content with this design. However, as they started to share it around, it got a nickname, Christ with a ball, because from afar, that's what it would look like, as the marks of the various things on the globe wouldn't appear on it from a distance, which is what most people in Rio would see the statue at. So, Heitor da Silva Costa consulted another Brazilian artist, and the arms open wide Christ the Redeemer statue was rendered and then made. Number 7. It has been damaged by lightning. I want you to think about the Christ the Redeemer for a sec. Think about how high up in the air it is in regards to Rio de Janeiro. If you don't know, it's nearly a half-mile up via a mountain that is within the city. That elevation was again done to ensure that the people could see the Christ the Redeemer statue just about everywhere they went. But as you hopefully know, the higher up into the air you go, the more problems nature has to throw at you. In this case, the problem is lightning. While Christ the Redeemer isn't made of metal, it still basically is a lightning rod because it sticks out like a sore thumb and it can attract lightning in its own way, which is why it shouldn't be too surprising that in its basically 100-year lifespan that it has been struck by lightning multiple times. One of the worst times by far, though, was in 2008. A massive electrical storm hit Rio de Janeiro, and the lightning not only hit the statue, it damaged its face and hands. Thankfully, the people were able to restore the statue to its former glory, even using the exact same material from the exact same quarry where the original building materials were taken from. More than likely, though, this kind of event will continue to happen given its height and Brazil's weather patterns. 6. It took nearly a decade to make. Construction projects in the modern age is nothing compared to the projects that have been done over time. Even in the 1920s, with all the advances they had made, they were still doing a lot of things by hand. Major construction vehicles hadn't been truly built yet, and even if they had, not everyone in the world had them. So to make the Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio de Janeiro, it took a lot of time and effort, because recall, it was built on top of a mountain. But the real problem for the making of the Christ the Redeemer wasn't resources, it was distance and time. Heitor da Silva Costa may have been the designer of the statue, but he had to go to France to find a sculptor to make it real. He would find Paul Landowski, and over the course of 9 years, Landowski would take the design, make his own version of the parts that would help him make the statue, including some improvements and design, and then he shipped them to Brazil. Done? Not quite. He made the pieces out of the materials he had in France. Once they were in Brazil, they were remade into pieces of reinforced concrete so that it would withstand the weather and other issues. So yeah, by the time the statue was all done, it had been nearly a decade since it had truly begun. Number 5. It may start looking different in 2020. As we just noted, much of the statue is made with reinforced concrete. It's strong, reliable, and as we also noted, can be easy to fix. However, what you see in regards to the statue isn't concrete. It's actually a material known as soapstone. Why is it coated in that? Well, not unlike things like the Statue of Liberty, which is actually made of copper but has a patina that makes it green, they wanted the statue to feel lighter and more visible and more visually pleasing, so the soapstone was used. Here's the problem. While they've been maintaining the Christ the Redeemer for almost 100 years and using the soapstone as a result of that, the soapstone from the quarry they've been using has officially run out of material, meaning that they can't make it the same color that they have been doing for the time of its life so far. That's not to say it won't be coated in another material. It's just not going to be the same soapstone that made it the color it is now. The next major renovation for the Christ the Redeemer statue is scheduled for 2020, and when that happens, the statue will likely look much darker than before. 4. Restoration has been done naturally and for visitors. As we've stated previously, the Christ the Redeemer statue has been worked on over the years since its official finishing in 1931. There has been damages to be fixed, visuals to be reapplied, and so on and so forth. But what might surprise you is that much of the restorations have been done in the last 40 years. Because the first major restoration of the Christ the Redeemer statue happened in 1980. What happened in 1980, you ask? That would be the arrival of Pope John Paul II. He was visiting Brazil, and so naturally the Catholic Church of the region decided to make sure that the statue was in pristine condition for him when he arrived. Since then, the statue has gone under many restorations and will have one in 2020 as noted. But you could argue that aside from the lightning damage one, none were more important than the one done for the Pope. Number 3. Going up? For the longest time, the only way to get to the Christ the Redeemer statue was to walk up the side of the mountain via 200 steps, which can be good for your exercise habits, but not exactly fun if you're not really in shape. But you had to do it in order to get to the statue. However, in 2003, people eventually realized that this wasn't the best idea, so they actually installed an escalator that can help get you to the statue quicker and without much work on your part. But be warned, those escalators can break, and that means you're going to be walking again. 2. Graffiti is a national crime. Sadly, the idea of spray painting or graffitiing a work of art is a very popular pastime for troublemakers and vandals. And in 2010, some such vandals decided that they were going to go up and mark up the Christ the Redeemer statue while it was going under a renovation. Here's the problem with that. It had honestly never happened before, so there wasn't an official response. Until they did it, and the mayor of Rio declared it a crime against the nation. So if anyone is dumb enough to follow their example, they can officially call themselves enemies of the state. Number 1. There's a chapel at the base of the statue. Without a doubt, the Christ the Redeemer statue is one of the most visited places in Rio de Janeiro, and for good reason. But some people have wanted to see it grow in its abilities, if you will, outside of it being a tourist attraction. And that's why in 2006, which was its official 75th birthday anniversary, they decided to make a small chapel at the base of the statue, one where you could truly get married there and have a small reception as well. You might think, why would people want to do that? Well, you have to remember that this isn't just a statue, it's a monument to Christ, and many people do weddings in churches and places like that to receive the blessing of God. And what better way to receive that blessing than in a place under a giant statue of Christ? Now, there are some drawbacks to this place. Because of location, the chapel is very small, and so you can't have a massive wedding there. Plus, since you have to walk up to the statue, that means you're walking up to it in your wedding gown and suit. So, if you think your potential wife or husband would love doing their wedding there, make sure they're ready for a hike. Granted, there is an escalator, but it's not the same. Facts and history of the legendary Colosseum. Number 9. A landmark of the world. The Kingdom of Rome was one of the most powerful and legendary empires of its time, or more accurately, both its time as a republic and a true emperor-led kingdom. But in the time after the fall of Nero, a new emperor arose in the form of Vespasian, and to help keep the people entertained and to prove that Rome was moving forward, he had over 100,000 slaves, via a war with the Jews, to construct the Colosseum of Vespasian. It was and is the largest amphitheater ever built. It was so massive and strong that it could hold 80,000 people in it, which was good because Rome was very large, and the contests that were held in the Colosseum were some of the things that people of Rome lived to see. And for hundreds of years, this is what the Colosseum was known for, and if you haven't noticed, it's still around. That's because Rome had a way of making concrete that basically made it immortal. Yes, the Colosseum has been damaged in the past, but that honestly only affected the wooden parts, not the concrete for the most part. Anyway, because of its history, it's one of the most popular landmarks in the world to visit, and by that, I mean it's literally one of the most popular places in the world for tourists. Just in 2018, over 7.4 million people went and saw the Colosseum, making it the most popular tourist attraction in the world. And as long as it's up, people are going to visit, especially since it's a pop culture icon, as we'll detail a little bit later. 8. Chariot racing, gladiator fights. If I was to mention Rome to you, there are likely several things that would pop into your mind. The city itself, its history, some of its rulers, and of course, the Colosseum. The Colosseum of Vespasian was one of the major wonders of the ancient world, and it was home to many a gladiator fight. The gladiator fights were battles of will and steel and featured both proud warriors and slaves trying to earn their freedom. These battles have been dramatized heavily over the years via movies like Gladiator and Spartacus, as well as numerous TV series that pay reference to them. So you might think that the gladiator fights were the most popular thing in Rome when they were around, but they weren't. While the Colosseum, at its peak construction before being destroyed partially in a fire, could fit anywhere from 50,000 to 90,000 people, the Circus Maximus, which was the place they held chariot racing at, could hold 250,000 people. That's quite a bit more. Granted, there's obviously more violence and story in gladiator fights, which is why not too many movies have been made about chariot racing outside of Ben-Hur. But still, in Roman times, racing was better than fights apparently. Then again, when you look at how fondly Rome is looked at in the modern times, the main thing people remember is the gladiator fights. My, how times have changed how we look at things. In case you were curious, the gladiator fights were outlawed when Christianity became the main faith of the people. The fights were deemed barbaric, among other things. Number 7. The Colosseum was built for peace, not violence. Because of the dramatic things that happened in the Colosseum, it's easy to think that something like that structure was built as a monument to violence, a display of the power of Rome and what others who aren't as high-classed as some have to look forward to. But in fact, that's not true. We've teased out some of the things that led to the construction of the Colosseum, but there is a lot more to the story than we've told you. As mentioned, Nero was the last great emperor before he killed himself in 68 AD. What was to follow was a series of civil wars, each one starting and ending because various factions of people wanted a new leader. a better leader, and one that was as far apart from what Nero was as possible. Which, if you think about it, it's not a bad request. The problem was that the first three emperors weren't exactly up to snuff, and thus more wars continued. Which brings us to Vespasian. Vespasian was not a politician. He was a general, a good one too, and it was actually his men that all but forced him to take the mantle of emperor. He only agreed to it because he realized that after all the politics and crap that had gone on with previous emperors, a more militaristic approach would be needed for what was to come. I know that may seem to sound like he did a dictatorship, but that's not it at all. Instead, he used the more basic and noble forms of military leadership to make Rome a better place. He made sure the Senate was reinstated and given their rightful and just powers, but also made sure that they weren't leeching off the profits of the people like previous versions. He and his sons even went so far as to ensure that the people were taken care of in a whole measure of ways. Eventually, once faith had been restored in the emperor position, Vespasian took the people to the former palace of Nero, one of the last green places in the city at the time, and declared that in the rubble they would make what would be an amphitheater. Once there, the people could come to be entertained and enjoy life instead of having to fear it. The Colosseum took 10 years to make, and by the time it was done, Vespasian had passed away, but his son Titus took over. And when it was completed, he was praised and loved by the people, not the least of which was that he was the emperor who helped rebuild parts of the Roman Empire after Vesuvius had erupted. And thus, the Colosseum was born, and it stood for a great many years. So yeah, it was a symbol of peace. Who knew? Sure, people died in there, but the people who watched the fights were happy. That means something, right? 6. What is in a name? Obviously, as we've noted almost innumerous times, this giant amphitheater is known as the Colosseum. But why is it called that at all? Sure, in modern times the name Colosseum means a grand place to do battle or a theater of sports or spectacles. But back then, it would have been just a word. So why was it this word? Believe it or not, it wasn't called the Colosseum originally. Instead, it was known as the Flavian Amphitheater. Why the heck was it called that, you ask me? Well, that's because of Vespasian and his sons, one of which I've already mentioned via Titus. Anyway, this line of history is known as the Flavian dynasty and was one of the more beloved and prosperous dynasties in Roman histories. So naturally, the amphitheater, which was again built during the reign of Vespasian for the most part, would be named after the family. The catch, though, is that there was another landmark nearby called the Colossus. No, not the Colossus of Rhodes, that's something else entirely. No, this Colossus was a giant statue of Emperor Nero, which is ironic that it was still around during the Colosseum's construction when you think about it, given what he did to Rome. Either way, it was named after the statue in part, though obviously we can't be sure of that as there's no real historical document as to how and why it ended up that way. Regardless, it's what we call it now, so be grateful. Number 5. Seating arrangements. Not unlike theaters or other massive venues of entertainment, the Colosseum needed to have a rather complex and yet elegant seating system to make sure that everyone could A. all get into the Colosseum to watch the fights, and B. make sure that they knew where they were allowed to sit in to help ensure traffic didn't overflow and such. At its peak, the Colosseum could hold about 80,000 people. This includes the areas that are now gone due to the fires, and so that's a lot of people and classes to sit down. So how exactly did they make it all work? Well, to start, the emperor had his own private box. Think of it like the skybox at basketball or football games, for him, his family, and his personal entourage to view everything in. If you think of Gladiator, that's kind of what it was. And yes, he did do the thumbs up and thumbs down thing. Anyway, right around him would be other authorities, likely to make sure nothing got out of hand and that no one tried to make an attempt on the emperor's life, which never happened to our knowledge. After that, everyone else was arranged in sections and by classes. So naturally, senators and other officials were seated in more prominent seating, while lower class members, non-citizens, and slaves usually had higher up seating or would even be in wooden bleachers. But what might surprise you is that outside of the Colosseum was a number system to help people get to their seats in sections, which is not unlike what many sports venues do now to ensure that people find their seats easily enough. 4. Underground. There have been many interpretations of how the layout of the Colosseum worked in regards to the fighters that were going to be put to battle, but the ones that are correct were ones that featured it all happening underground. The bottom of the Colosseum that you view from the seats was not concrete like the rest of the building, but rather was made up of a thick wood, one that would withstand the pounding of battle and more. But underneath the floor is where every gladiator would wait their turn for a fight. Then, when the time came, they would go and be raised up to the entrances via special elevators. If you recall the movie Gladiator, there was a point where a tiger popped out of the ground to attack Maximus. This really did happen, as there were up to 30 trapdoors on the battlefield, and they could be sprung at any time with various animals or people to ensure that the fight was kept entertaining and thus surprising. Nowadays, if you were to visit the Colosseum, you'd see that the wood floor has been torn up, and that's by design, as they want tourists and visitors to see just what was going on just out of view from the spectators. Number 3. Water bottles. When you think of the Colosseum as a whole, you no doubt picture all of the amazing gladiator battles that happened, or sometimes the man versus beast action that would happen. But because of the layout and size of the Colosseum, there was a third kind of battle that could happen here: water battles. Oh yes, they would flood the arena area and would have ships and combatants at the ready so that they could go and have naval battles. While somewhat rare to be honest, this was another way of ensuring that people would be entertained and not just have the same kind of gladiator battles over and over again. Eventually though, the naval battles were taken to another place. That way the underground and backstage area could be improved and not have to fear water damage. 2. Training. Gladiators were warriors, but not all of them were born that way. Many were slaves forced to fight, or criminals who had been caught and thrust into the Colosseum as a type of punishment. Not all who entered that place had proper training, but a great many did. In fact, there were multiple training academies for the gladiators that were in Rome. The biggest of these was the Ludus Magnus, a facility that you could actually see from the Colosseum and has been dug up in terms of archaeology to see just what it would offer those under its wings. The training that they did there was real and intense. They even had a mini arena to field test their warriors should the need arise. Furthermore, they had rooms that were little more than cells, and yet for some, being a gladiator was the highest honor one could get in their life, so they happily accepted the training. Oh, and if you're wondering why training would matter in a fight like this, think about it from the viewer's perspective. The Colosseum was a theater, a place of entertainment. Would you want to see two people fight that had never held a sword before? Or would you want to see a true battle of wills to see who would come out on top? That's what I thought. Number 1. Free-for-all. One of the reasons why the Colosseum was so popular wasn't just because of the fights. It was because the early emperors made sure that people knew they could come here, be entertained, and not pay a penny for it. That's right, much of the time the Colosseum Games weren't funded by the people. Rather, they were funded by the emperor himself. He would pay out of pocket to make the event happen, and at times would go and get food for everyone to eat so that they could dine as they watched the fights. This made the Colosseum the place to be in the minds of many, so even when attendants did have a fee, they didn't mind as much because they knew they were going to have a good time.
13 surprising facts about Taj Mahal. Number 13. Built to honor a lost love. Let's start off at the beginning of things, shall we? The Taj Mahal as we know it was built by Shah Jahan, who was the emperor at the time in India. While he was the ruler, you could also say that he was honestly a ladies' man, as he had multiple wives that bore him many children. However, his third wife was particularly special to him because it was his first true love. Her name was Arjamand Banu Begum, whose other name and more famous name was Mumtaz Mahal. You see where this is going, right? Well, these two had a very special relationship, and as such, they had 14 children together, which was very common in those times. Their marriage lasted 19 years, but sadly, after complications happened with their last child, Mahal died, and this struck Shah very hard. So much so that he felt compelled to go and make her the grandest tomb possible. 1 year after she died, the Taj Mahal was begun, and 2 decades later it was finally finished. So in point of fact, not only is this a massive landmark of India, but it's also a testament to the power of love between a man and a woman. You know, if you want to get all sappy. Number 12. The look of the grave. Take a look at the Taj Mahal from the outside. You look at this and think what? More than likely you note the grand design, the attention to detail, the lavish look, and so on and so forth. And as we just established, the grand nature of it was meant to go and appease the loss of a loved one. So thus, you might think the grave in which the Mahal herself was buried was just as lavish and opulent as everything else, right? Well, no. Quite ironically, the Indian people, specifically the Muslim side of India, have certain beliefs of how a grave should look. In short, it cannot be decorated. The reason for this would be an expression of vanity, and thus, if you were to head to the lower level of the Taj Mahal, you'd find that it looks very basic and drab. This isn't because they ran out of money or time. It's because they were following the law of the land. What also makes this interesting is that it's in direct contrast to, say, the Egyptian method of burial for certain people and pharaohs, as their tombs were adorned with gold and other items to carry on into the afterlife. Number 11. Asymmetrical grave. Take a look once again at the Taj Mahal. Another thing that sticks out about it is the fact that this place is perfectly symmetrical from top to bottom and left to right. This was by design, and if you look at both inside and out, you'll see the same meticulous level of detail in keeping it symmetrical. Except for, you guessed it, the gravesite. But this time it wasn't Mahal who broke the tradition. It was the Shah himself. You see, when the tomb was done, her grave was put in the direct center of the tomb to keep the symmetrical aesthetic, but when the Shah died and was put in there, he was put in the west of the center, and thus the symmetrical look was broken. And you know what? I think we'll give him a pass on this one. Number 10. Protecting the grave. Take a wild guess as to what I'm going to ask you to do right now. Yep. Look at the Taj Mahal. You'll see the 4 towers that are at the 4 corners of the site. You might think those are just set pieces or something else to really boost the look of the grave or the building. But ironically, the man who built the place, Ustad Ahmad Lahari, knew that these needed to be there, but he also knew they needed to be erected in a certain way. While many buildings at this time, back in the 17th century, were marvels of architecture, they tended to have a problem with not being built well weight-wise, and thus, they would collapse upon themselves for various reasons. The architect here knew that this would happen, and that if they collapsed, the towers would likely fall onto the building, and thus hurt the grave. To prevent that, the 4 towers are honestly tilted outward just enough so that if something were to cause them to collapse, they won't hurt the grave. Call it an insurance policy, one that's still active today. Number 9. A collapse could still happen. Remember that insurance policy I just mentioned? Well, it's a little more apropos than you might think, because like in many ancient structures, there are many who wonder if the building is honestly going to last as long as people think it will. Well, sure, it hasn't collapsed yet. But in the 20th century, many people noticed that there was a structural decay in the building, and apparently, it's starting to grow. Some of the towers have been shifting by an inch or two over the last couple of decades, and some were so afraid that they thought it would collapse by 2016. Obviously, that didn't happen, but the fear is still there. Will it collapse? Well, that's hard to say, but it could. And it might. Just be a matter of when and not if. Number 8. Manpower. One of the biggest mysteries of the ancient world is how the various ancient cultures were able to go and build all sorts of impressive buildings, such as the Taj Mahal, the pyramids of Giza, the Sphinx, and so on and so forth. While we don't have all the answers, we do have a big one: manpower. To get over some of the hurdles of not having modern-day machines and automation, nations like India used whole legions of people in order to get things done. In the case of the Taj Mahal, it took 20,000 people to get it up and perfect. And that wasn't the only thing they used either. Number 7. Elephant power. Yep, they went there. India is known for using elephants in many ways, including using them for weddings. But when it came to the construction of the Taj Mahal, they were sure they needed help in moving the materials, so thus, they brought in over 1,000 elephants to help them get the various materials to the site. This would help explain certain factors, including the part where this took under 20 years to make, where other projects took significantly longer. Just admit it. You want to see footage of them using the elephants moving stuff around, don't you? I know I do. Number 6. The Mark of the Calligrapher. Calligraphy isn't as appreciated now as it was back then. When the Taj Mahal was built, it wasn't just an architectural wonder. It was one that was inlaid with various references to the Muslim faith and the Quran, all headed up by their calligrapher, Abdel Haq, known professionally as Ahmad Khan Shirazi. He oversaw all of the work to make sure the text was done perfectly. And then to thank him for his work, he was allowed to sign his name in a small message at the base of the interior dome, which, to be clear, was a high honor at the time. But here's the twist. While others would have signed something big and boastful, he didn't. Rather, he penned, "Written by the insignificant being, Amanat Khan Shirazi." How humble. Number 5. Different cultures, different gardens. As we've noted, the Taj Mahal was imparted with many things to enforce the fact that this was a Muslim building and ruler who made it. This also was brought to something a little more basic in the gardens, which had dozens of flower beds with various plants from the region and beyond. However, when the British Empire came and brought them into the empire, they decided that the gardens of the Taj Mahal needed to resemble their culture instead of the Muslim culture. As such, they were made into more proper and subdued aesthetics. Because, of course they did. Number 4. Camouflage. Pop quiz. If you were to go and wage war on India, would you think about bombing the Taj Mahal to strike a blow to the people? And don't worry, you don't have to answer that. But the answer would have likely been yes, and the people of India know that. In fact, during many wars that have happened in and around the country, they feared getting bombed so much that they went and made scaffolding around the Taj Mahal to try to deter airplanes from bombing it, and it worked. Because by the time they were done, if you looked down to the area from above, it would look like a thicket of bamboo. Thus, it has never been harmed during a war. Number 3. A second Taj Mahal? There are many rumors and legends about the Taj Mahal itself, and one of the biggest ones comes from French explorer Jean-Baptiste Travainier, who noted that when he met with Shah, the ruler was apparently planning to make a second Taj Mahal, one that would be black in nature and built on the other side of the Yamuna River. It was, according to legend, abandoned by Shah, which was appropriate because 1 year after their meeting he died. But apparently, it was meant to be a house for his own crypt and be a complement to the one that he was building for his late wife. Number 2. Did Shah Jahan really make the Taj Mahal? As we've already discussed, there are many rumors and legends about the Taj Mahal, but easily, the most important one is that of whether the stated ruler Shah Jahan really made it. Most believe he did, but others aren't so sure. So if it wasn't Shah, who do these people think built it? That would apparently be Hindu king Raja Pamardev, who many people have brought forth and tried to petition the Indian Supreme Court to try and get his name the credit it deserves. But each time it was struck down. But just as important, when one was struck down, another person would bring it back up again. There is also stated to be a secret room in the Taj Mahal that houses proof one way or another of who truly made the place. But obviously, the sealed room is protected by the government and hasn't been opened in a very long time. Number 1. No cars allowed. If you ever got to the Taj Mahal yourself, you'll notice something rather quickly when you arrive. Mainly, you have to walk a little bit to get there. And when you do get there, there won't be a car or a bus in sight. This was actually very intentional, because no automobiles are allowed within 50 meters of the place. Why is that? I'll tell you. It's because of the gasoline emissions that they produce. They can harm paint when in enough quantities, and thus the people protecting the Taj Mahal don't want it to be tarnished anymore just because of the cars in the area. That's also a reason why the air is so clean there if you think about it.
10 must-know facts about the ancient city of Petra. Once a thriving epicenter of Arabian trade, Petra is now a city frozen in time, trapped between towering sandstone cliffs and the shifting sands of the desert. From the site where Moses brought forth miraculous waters to a buried majestic city, and now a new wonder of the world, we will you reveal 10 jaw-dropping facts about this mysterious city. Number 10. The rise of a great city. King Aretas IV, the powerful ruler of the Nabateans, is carried through the streets in a grand procession. The people of Petra have come together for an epic festival honouring Dushara, their chief god. Music fills the air as priests lead rituals in front of the impressive stone monuments, while celebrants enjoy feasts of dates, bread and wine. Colourful processions wind through the city, with offerings placed at various temples. This is what the now buried city was like under the rule of the great king Aretas IV in the 1st century AD. But the rise of this majestic city didn't start there. During the Iron Age, the Arab tribe, Nabateans, rose to dominate the regions of Jordan and southern Palestine, Israel. They were first mentioned by name in 312 BCE during the Nabatean confrontations. Following the death of Alexander the Great, the Macedonian Antigonid dynasty sought to expand their territory and attempted to raid Nabatea 3 times. Their aim was to seize control of the bitumen industry, a valuable resource that the Nabateans largely monopolized. Bitumen was especially important to the Egyptians, as it was used in the process of mummification. That the Antigonids were willing to invest in a costly invasion highlights the massive wealth and influence the Nabateans had already attained by this period. The Nabateans' growing reputation as rich and sophisticated people indicates they were mastering the trade networks that would eventually secure their influence over the flow of precious spices and incense across crucial trade routes. Around this time, the kingdom of Nabatea was likely established. Their wealth, coupled with the strength of their skilled Arab warriors, allowed them to build the majestic ancient city of Petra, a marvel of stone-carved architecture that would become a symbol of their dominance and prosperity. Number 9. Handcrafted city. Just south of Amman, the capital of Jordan, the landscape transforms dramatically into a sprawling desert, first rocky, then giving way to endless stretches of sand. But before you hit that arid stretch, there's an unexpected gem tucked away in the rugged landscape, Petra, a city that's been hidden for centuries. Dating back roughly 2,000 years, Petra was once the thriving capital of the Nabatean kingdom, a powerful civilization that dominated much of modern-day Jordan from the 3rd century BC to the 1st century AD. This remarkable stone city, hand-carved intricately into the rose-red sandstone cliffs, offers a fascinating glimpse into an ancient world. With its towering pillars, elaborate monuments and mysterious caves, Petra is often hailed as one of the most stunning sights in the Middle East, sprawling over 100 square miles, 4 times the size of Manhattan. Petra is more than just a visual marvel. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the new 7 wonders of the world. Its allure extends beyond its breathtaking beauty, as it also showcases the ingenuity of the Nabateans. In a region once deemed unlivable, these ancient people developed extraordinary water management techniques that transformed the barren landscape into a thriving metropolis. Number 8. Miraculous desert water. Before the Nabateans jumped into long-distance trade and military adventures, they first had to tackle the tough landscape they called home. The rocky terrain and desert climate weren't exactly welcoming, but they managed to turn those canyons and gullies into lively streets and thoroughfares. It was no small feat. It led to the rise of one of the most extraordinary civilizations in history. The Nabateans' greatest accomplishment was probably their system of water management. They engineered systems to harness flash floods, carving channels into sandstone to collect rainwater and guide it into massive cisterns. Dams were built to control the floods, storing water for the dry seasons. The result was nothing short of breathtaking. A green oasis in the desert, teeming with fountains, swimming pools, and lush groves. This urban miracle sustained a city of 30,000 people, many of whom were immigrants from across the region. Egyptians, Syrians, Judeans, Greeks, Romans and others flocked to Petra to experience the paradise that felt like a slice of heaven on earth. Each cultural group added its own flair, turning Petra into a cosmopolitan playground where art, architecture, and innovation thrived. While a lot of the art has found its way to museums, the pieces that are still here tell the story of a lively, multicultural city that keeps inspiring wonder. Number 7. Influence of Petra's women. The Nabateans worshipped 3 powerful female deities: Aluza, the mighty goddess, Allat, the goddess of fortune and prosperity, and Manat, the goddess of fate. The people of Petra honoured them at their grand shrines and temples. Long before Islam, Aluza was celebrated all across the Arabian Peninsula, and her image has been found throughout Petra, carved into small blocks of stone. For centuries, the Nabateans used these blocks to represent their deities, often carving basic features like eyes and maybe a nose. These are known as eye idols. Archaeological finds in the temples show that women took on significant roles in the rituals, especially since the deities were female. Nabatean women were important members of society. They enjoyed more rights and freedoms than many women in Europe or the Roman world. Although the Nabateans didn't leave behind many written records, the ones that do exist reveal fascinating insights into the power and status of women. Surprisingly, for a time at least, women seem to hold a lot of influence here. While the Nabateans weren't a matriarchal society, the worship of these strong female deities helped create a culture where women's contributions were appreciated and recognised. Number 6. An elaborate graveyard. Petra is truly a marvel of the ancient world, and what may surprise many visitors is the sheer number of tombs and burial sites scattered throughout the city. Estimates suggest there are more than 1,000 individual tombs carved directly into Petra's rose-coloured sandstone cliffs, making it one of the largest royal tomb complexes anywhere on the planet. Many of these elaborate tombs, like the iconic Al-Khazna, also known as the Treasury, and the imposing monastery, were designed to serve as the final resting places for royalty and high-ranking members of Nabatean society. Their ornate facades and grand scale signify the importance placed on honouring the deceased. The tomb of Sextius Florentinus, a Roman military commander, was also found in Petra. Beyond the visual splendour of tombs like these, the sheer volume of burial sites across Petra underscores just how significant and populous this ancient city must have been. Now, let's take a look at the iconic sites in this iconic city. Number 5. The iconic Khazna. The Khazna, often referred to as the Treasury, is believed to be the tomb of Nabatean king Aretas IV, who ruled in the 1st century BC. This magnificent temple facade, carved directly into the rose-coloured sandstone cliffs, serves as the iconic entrance to the ancient city of Petra. It is easily the most recognisable structures of the Petra city. As visitors make their way through the narrow, winding passage of the Sikh, the site of this majestic monument slowly comes into view, emerging from the rock in a way that feels almost otherworldly. Towering at around 40 metres, the intricate facade is a masterpiece of craftsmanship. It features a mix of Hellenistic and Nabatean architectural styles, with Corinthian columns, friezes, and sculptures carved directly into the rose-coloured sandstone. Despite its name, Al-Khazna wasn't actually a treasury. The name comes from a legend that pirates hid treasure inside the urn at the top of the structure. In reality, archaeologists believe it was a tomb, possibly for one of the Nabatean kings. The grandeur of the design, with its massive scale and intricate detailing, was likely meant to demonstrate the power and wealth of the Nabateans. What makes Al-Khazne even more impressive is the level of precision achieved with basic tools. The Nabateans used simple chisels and hammers, yet the symmetry and artistic detail were flawless. Standing before it, you can't help but feel awe at both the scale and skill involved in its creation. Number 4. The ever-fascinating Sikh. Perhaps the next most iconic architectural marvel of this long-lost civilization is the stunning entrance to Petra, known as the Sikh. The Sikh is the narrow, winding gorge that serves as the main entrance to the ancient city of Petra. Stretching over 1 kilometre in length, the 6 towering sandstone walls rise approximately 200 feet high on either side. As you walk through the Sikh, you'll notice the intricate relief carvings, niches, and remnants of an ancient drainage system carved directly into the stone walls. These features demonstrate the Nabateans' skilled craftsmanship and thoughtful design of this iconic passageway. At the end of the SCU, the view opens up to reveal Petra's crown jewel, the treasury. This towering temple facade, carved directly into the rock face, stands as an impressive introduction to the ancient city. Number 3. No written record. It's pretty wild that the Nabateans, the incredible tribe who built this 2,000-year-old marvel, didn't exactly leave written records about their history. Most of what we know comes from archaeological findings and external accounts provided by ancient historians like Strabo and Pliny the Elder. These sources describe Petra as a bustling trading hub, highlighting its significance in the ancient world. Archaeological discoveries, such as pottery, tools, and inscriptions, have shed light on various aspects of Nabatean life. For instance, the presence of altars and temples indicates their polytheistic beliefs, worshipping deities like Dushara and Aluza. Additionally, the elaborate burial sites reveal complex funerary practices, showcasing their beliefs about the afterlife. Despite these insights, many elements of Nabatean society remain unclear. Number 2. The rediscovery of Petra. In 1812, Swiss explorer and geographer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt embarked on an extraordinary journey across the desert, driven by a desire to uncover the secrets of the Middle East. During his travels, he heard whispers of a mysterious ancient city called Petra, rumoured to be hidden somewhere in the deserts of Jordan. For centuries, the exact location of Petra had been a closely guarded secret from outsiders, but Burckhardt was determined to see it for himself. To prepare, he spent months in the region learning the local Arabic dialect and crafting a disguise to blend in with the locals. This careful preparation was essential for gaining access to the hidden city. After chasing down clues for months, Burckhardt made his way through a narrow, shadowy canyon and, to his surprise, stumbled upon the breathtaking ruins of Petra, more incredible than he had ever imagined. He became the first European to set eyes on Petra in over 500 years, and his vivid description of the city made headlines all over the world. The entrance to Petra boasts a stunning, intricately carved structure standing about 140 feet high and cut right from the rock. Burckhardt also talked about the people who lived there, highlighting how they blended elements of Greek and Hellenistic art and architecture with influences from Assyria in what's now Iraq. This blend of styles resulted in the incredible carved architecture that defines Petra today. Number 1. Fall of Petra. For centuries, the downfall of the ancient Nabatean city of Petra has puzzled historians. After the city's rediscovery in 1812, the prevailing theory was that shifts in major trade routes were responsible for Petra's eventual collapse. However, recent research has shed new light on the multifaceted factors that contributed to the decline of this once thriving metropolis. According to American geologist Thomas Paradise, archaeological evidence gathered through the use of GIS mapping and laser technology has revealed a pivotal event that likely marked the beginning of Petra's demise, a catastrophic flood in the 5th century CE. Paradise's findings indicate that a major flood inundated the downtown core of Petra, causing significant damage and disrupting the city's infrastructure for at least a year. While Petra's inhabitants were able to rebuild after this devastating flood, the event appears to have been a turning point for the ancient city. This flood seemed to have been the first in a series of natural disasters and economic shifts that gradually undermined Petra's prosperity. The city was never quite able to regain its former glory after this initial catastrophe. To this day, the exact reasons behind the final desolation of the ancient stone city of Petra remain shrouded in mystery. 10 astonishing facts about Chichen Itza, wonder of the world. Once a thriving Maya city, Chichen Itza was home to brilliant advances in water preservation, architecture, and astronomy. Despite its military strength and impressive pyramids, this magnificent city faced a sudden downfall. Join us as we uncover 10 intriguing facts about it. Number 10. The rise of a new civilization. From 40,000 to 20,000 BCE, ancient travelers crossed over a land bridge between modern-day Alaska and Siberia, making their way into North America. They moved southward, drawn by warmer climates, better hunting grounds, and abundant plant life, settling in the Yucatan Peninsula of modern Mexico around 10,000 to 8,000 BCE. The Maya people established themselves in this resource-rich region, filled with obsidian, jade, and plenty of fish. By 6000 BCE, agriculture took root, producing a large food surplus and driving population growth. By 1500 BCE, small farming villages were thriving, eventually evolving into chiefdoms and early Mayan states, centered around the cultivation of maize, beans, and squash. They mastered farming techniques like irrigation and terracing to sustain their growing communities. But the Maya were not alone. They coexisted with the Olmecs, who are often called the first mother culture of present-day Mexico, and who laid the groundwork for future Mesoamerican civilizations. Number 9. The story behind Chichen Itza. Chichen Itza, a complex of Mayan ruins, sits at the heart of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The site is one of the new 7 wonders of the world, and for good reason. This ancient city was the epicenter of Mesoamerican civilization, and its name says it all. Chichen Itza translates to "at the mouth of the well of the Itza," named after the geological feature of the area and the Maya tribe that settled there. The site is dotted with cenotes, natural wells that formed when limestone surfaces collapsed, exposing the water beneath. As you explore Chichen Itza, you'll come across some incredible structures. Take the El Caracol, a round-shaped observatory that was specifically designed to track the movements of planets and the Sun. And then there's the iconic Pyramid of Kukulkan, with its 365 steps, 91 on each side and one at the top. This ancient calendar in disguise was used to determine the best times for planting and harvesting crops, with each side representing a different season. But Chichen Itza wasn't always a Maya stronghold. According to National Geographic and other sources, the Toltecs invaded the city in the 10th century, leaving their mark on the architecture. The Temple of Kukulkan, built after the invasion, shows a strong central Mexican influence. In fact, experts believe that many of Chichen Itza's most iconic monuments, including the Pyramid of Kukulkan, the Temple of Warriors, and the Great Ball Court, may have been built or rebuilt by the Toltecs due to their distinctive style. Number 8. Ancient aliens. The ancient Mayan civilization is still a huge mystery to archaeologists, and new discoveries only add to the puzzle. Their obsession with the stars and their super-accurate calendar system leave us wondering, how on earth did they come up with this stuff? To get to the bottom of it, we need to look at what the Mayans believed in. According to Mayan legends, their supreme deity was Quetzalcoatl, a winged snake who came from the sky and taught them about astronomy, architecture, and building. This feathered snake god promised to return to Earth, with some calculations pointing to December 21, 2012. a date that sparked both excitement and fear. There's a possibility we got the math wrong. The Mayans' descriptions of things they saw in the sky, like a flying snake, might have been more than just fantasy. Could they have been talking about aliens? It's an interesting idea, especially when you look at the tomb of Pakal, one of the last Mayan rulers. The discovery of a carving in Palenque depicting the ruler Pakal seemingly controlling a machine with flames and smoke raises more questions. The inscriptions around the tomb suggest he was blasting off into space. The weird thing is that Pakal's body was found in a coffin, and he was way taller than the average Mayan, with a bizarre bone structure. It's possible that aliens visited the Mayans and taught them a thing or two. We can't say for sure, but it's an interesting possibility. Number 7. The Deadly Mayan Olympics. In the mid-1930s, an expedition uncovered a hidden axis inside the pyramid at Chichen Itza, leading to a temple beneath the one at the top. Inside this subterranean chamber, archaeologists found a statue of the god Chacmul and a throne adorned with a jaguar's shade. But that's not all Chichen Itza had to offer. It was discovered the ancient Mayans also had a dedicated space for playing a game called Tlachtli, which bears a striking resemblance to modern-day soccer. The Tlachtli court measured a whopping 168 metres by 70 metres, with players tasked with propelling a ball through rims placed on either side of the field. The rules were brutally strict. No hands or feet were allowed, making it a physically demanding and mentally intense game that required incredible skill. Historical accounts tell of a Spaniard who watched a game that looked a lot like modern soccer, but was way more dangerous. Players kept a heavy rubber ball in the air by hitting it with their arms, hips, or thighs. The balls came in different sizes, and some were heavy enough to cause serious injuries, or even worse. The goal was to score the most points, but the game had a bigger cultural role. It was tied to Maya trade and religious traditions, used to settle disputes as a stand-in for war, and sometimes just played for fun. The stakes were very high, with winners and losers sometimes facing the ultimate consequence: ritual human sacrifice. While the game shared some similarities with soccer, players used their shoulders and elbows instead of their legs. Honestly, we can't help but wonder how the Mayans came up with this insanely dangerous game. Definitely, no aliens are involved in this one. Number 6. The science behind the mysterious pyramid. The Temple of Kukulkan, or El Castillo, in Chichen Itza, is a mind-blowing structure that showcases the incredible architectural prowess of the ancient Maya civilization. This massive monument stands 100 feet tall. That's as high as a 10-story building, and is one of the new 7 wonders of the world. At the top, you'll find a sacred temple dedicated to Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity, which symbolizes the connection between our world and the heavens. Each side of this 60,000-ton structure features steep steps that represent the 18 months and 20 days of the Maya calendar, totaling 365 steps, one for each day of the year. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the shadows create an illusion of a snake slithering down the pyramid, connecting the snake heads at the base to the Kukulkan statue at the top. At the base of El Castillo, you'll notice 4 large serpent heads carved from limestone, representing the equinox serpent, which is a symbol of the cycle of death and rebirth. These intricate details showcase the Mayas' impressive grasp of astronomy and their deep connection to celestial bodies. Number 5. How did the Maya get building materials? The ancient Maya didn't have it easy when it came to resources, but they still managed to build several incredible structures using limestone. So, how did they do it? They developed a pretty clever technique for extracting the limestone. They used sharp stone shards like chert, sometimes attaching them to wooden sticks. They gouged deep channels into the ground, creating a checkerboard pattern in the limestone rocks. By doing so, they could reach the natural break in the limestone bedrock. Once the checkerboard blocks cracked away from the ground, they used wooden levers to pry the blocks out, revealing the resourcefulness of the Maya people in constructing Chichen Itza's iconic pyramid. Maya pyramids are an architectural marvel, featuring intricately carved stone stair steps. These structures served different purposes depending on the region. In addition to their pyramids, Maya engineers also built impressive bridges, arches, and pressurized water systems, showcasing their advanced skills. Number 4. The Maya calendar. Instead of sticking to a regular 12-month calendar, the Maya had a bunch of different calendars to keep track of their lives. Meanwhile, the rest of us often rely on more than one calendar only when we can't choose between a movie night or a game night. The Maya had a 365-day calendar called the Hab, which had 18 months with 20 days each, plus a short month called Wayeb that was just 5 days long. They also used a 260-day religious calendar called the Tzolkin, made up of 20 periods of 13 days. These two calendars worked together in 52-year cycles, and a lot of important events lined up between them. But wait, there's more! They also had a third calendar called the Long Count, which tracked super long periods, about 2,880,000 days, or around 7,885 solar years. This long count calendar is where the whole doomsday prediction for 2012 came from. But the Maya didn't really buy into that. For them, 2012 was just a year when a bunch of their calendars reset, kind of like a new century in our Gregorian calendar. Number 3. Archaeological discoveries. Chichen Itza, one of Mexico's most famous archaeological sites, has revealed many fascinating discoveries about the Maya and Toltec civilizations. A recent find is an ancient cave full of artifacts, which suggests Chichen Itza was part of the Great Maya Aquifer project. In March 2019, archaeologists found a cave system called Balamku, meaning jaguar god, where they uncovered over 150 artifacts, many dedicated to the rain god Tlaloc. Balamku may have been linked to the Maya aquifer system, which connected cities across the Yucatan Peninsula. This network of cenotes and underground caves provided water and played a key role in their religious practices. Excavations have also revealed a complex system of hieroglyphic writing. The discovery of ceramic vessels with intricate hieroglyphs has given researchers new insights into the Maya language, showing a rich culture and advanced governance. These findings continue to deepen our understanding of the Maya's sophisticated society. Number 2. Temple of the Warriors. At Chichen Itza, the Temple of the Warriors is a must-see attraction that's been restored to its original glory sometime between 1925 and 1928. Known for its detailed bas-reliefs, it features carvings of Toltec warriors, eagles, and jaguars devouring human hearts. These figures were once covered in plaster and painted in vivid colours, giving the temple a more striking appearance. The carvings also depict the god Tlalchitonatio and a reclining figure of Chak Mol. The temple consists of 4 platforms, standing about 40 feet high and 133 feet wide. 2 sides of the structure are lined with 200 columns. At the entrance, visitors encounter a large flight of stairs that leads them to Chak Mol, positioned as the guardian of the temple. Rows of warrior columns stand at the front and sides, adding to the grandeur of the architecture. The bas-reliefs, showing dramatic battle scenes, tell stories of the warrior culture that once thrived here. The Temple of the Warriors remains one of the most vital and imposing constructions in Chichen Itza, both for its impressive design and its rich symbolic history. Number 1. Fall of a civilization. Chichen Itza was abandoned by the Maya around the 15th century, and the exact reasons for this still spark debate among archaeologists. The city was rediscovered by Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century, but major archaeological digs didn't kick off until the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Most of what we know about the site has come together over the last 200 to 300 years. In 1988, Chichen Itza was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site, highlighting its cultural and historical importance. That same year, the Tower of London and the ancient city of Rhodes also received this honour during UNESCO's 12th session.